amidst sun-gilded seashore, salt-washed breeze, and the occasional cacophony of seagulls. A weathered old man drags an equally old and worn dory up and onto a lonely rock in the middle of the cove. He's been looking forward to this moment all day. A chance to get away from everyone and everything. To lose himself in the soothing breath of the tide, as well as his stories. These are stories from the rock. Hi everyone, and welcome to our 9th episode of Stories from the Rock. We had to take a little bit of a break since our last episode, primarily because I had to recover spoons. For those of you who don't know, recovering spoons is a euphemism that many neurodivergent folks use to mean time away so that we are able to accomplish tasks in an efficient way when we're otherwise overwhelmed by other factors. It's an accommodation that many neurodivergent folks like myself need from time to time in order to stay efficient and to have maximized output for whatever it is we do. It's not just for recovering spoons, though, that we took a break. As announced on our Facebook page, I say we now in incorrectly, because the reason is that our editor Trish Stone unfortunately passed away in France. I would like to talk more about that now, but every time I try, my voice ends up breaking a bit, and I can never get fully through it. That said, also, this episode has a bit of a theme that perhaps would make that inappropriate to talk about anyway. So I've decided that our 10th episode, breaking into the double digits, will be an episode in dedication and memory to Trish Stone. And I will write a story specifically for her to honor her memory, which I will put out for our 10th episode. This episode, however, our 9th episode, should be much more cheerful and have a much more happier tone. And that's what Trish would have wanted as well, as she was perhaps the sunniest person you could ever meet. This episode, we are lucky enough to fulfill one of the main missions of Story from the Rock. And that was to have a platform where neurodivergent or otherwise marginalized writers who face systemic barriers in regards to the typical ins and outs of the literary industry and the writing industry can have a platform to express ourselves without any of the usual hoops and barriers that would typically present for writers like us. And so we have a story now that is very long, but long is good, especially when it's coming from a neurodivergent writer like myself. And this writer is very well known in the Canadian literary arts circles. Her name is Maryte Running. And we were lucky enough to become friends through various writers groups. And she very much wanted to contribute to our podcast. And so this 9th episode will be featuring her and her work, which we'll actually get to know a little bit more about right now. Our author's full name is Maryte Rutkauskas-Running, hyphenated name, and otherwise goes by Maggie. She was born in Keighley, Yorkshire, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, in England, and immigrated to Canada, Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, where she lives now. She has strong ancestral ties to Ireland and Lithuania and likes to incorporate those ancestral and cultural ties into many of her stories. It's a very similar thing that I do as well with my Norse, Irish, and Newfoundland roots. I try to incorporate those into stories whenever I can as well. She visited Newfoundland a few years ago with her sister, whose daughter lives here, and I believe that's in Brigus. And shout out to Brigus. She wanted me to put that there too. Maryte did, and I've been to Brigus as well. Brigus is an amazing place. The people themselves are very cheerful and cheeky, from what I can tell, and that is just straight up my alley. I would love to visit Brigus again one day because they are. It's one of my favorite towns in Newfoundland for very good reason, and apparently Maryte's as well. So that lends it a bit of evidence to its credibility. She loved it there. She says in all capital letters, as it should be. I would put them there too. She has a niece, and her niece had a son whom they named Oliver Dorian. Oh, which is also the title of the story we're about to read out today. She had to write a story about Newfoundland, and that might have been for this podcast, not quite sure. And her great nephew came up with the story that we're going to read out here now. Yeah, and so that is a bit about Maryte Rutkauskas-Running as a full name. But there's a bit more too that I wanted to touch on, and that's that she received a very cool gold medal, I believe, for her work called Hats for Haley. And that was in the Next Generation Indie Awards, which is a pretty big deal. She won gold for that. And so this is a writer who is very well known in Canadian writing circles, and she's graced our humble podcast with her presence for this episode. And so, without any further ado, let's dive right on in to Oliver Dorian by Maryte Running. Oliver Dorian by Maryte Running. Chapter 1. The Sea. And there it was, the sea. And along the sea was the land. The land was dotted with little fishing villages up and down the coast. One of those dots was the fishing village of Brigus. This is where a young boy named Oliver Dorian lived, by the sea. Oliver stood on the beach with his dog Jasper. He was waiting for his father to come home. His father, Andy, was a fisherman and was out catching fish and other seafood on their boat called the Violette. The sky started to darken, which meant a storm was coming. It was springtime, and the weather could be unpredictable at this time of year. Oliver looked at the darkening clouds in the sky and then across the sea for their boat. He hoped his father would come home soon. People in their little fishing village were always warning Oliver and the other children about the sea. During a storm, it could rise quickly and become dangerous. The sea could become a mighty force. You have to be very careful and respect its power, his father always reminded Oliver. Oliver's watching was interrupted by the frantic cawing of a bird. It was a herring gull. There were lots of herring gulls where he lived. They looked a lot like seagulls, but there were a few differences in the color of their bodies and beaks, with the herring gull being darker in those areas. Oliver looked down the beach to where the cawing was coming from. Then he saw it. This herring gull was in trouble. One of its legs got caught in a discarded plastic grocery bag that had become stuck between two of the larger rocks. It seemed the bird had tried to land on the rocks and was now caught tight. It couldn't fly and started to panic. The bird was flapping its wings, trying to get loose. Oliver hurried down the beach towards the panicked bird. He didn't really know what to do, but he felt like he had to try to see if he could help. It was difficult, as the bird was desperate and was by nature scared of humans, especially humans with dogs, like Jasper. After telling Jasper to stay, Oliver went to the bird slowly. He spoke to the bird in a low voice. "It's okay. I'll help you." Without another thought, he took off his jacket. He carefully placed it over the bird, covering it first and then loosely wrapped it in his jacket. This caused the gull to stop moving. With the bird held still, He unwound the plastic wrapped around its leg. It didn't take long once the bird stopped flapping around. There, said Oliver, with the bird's leg freed. Oliver removed the jacket. Now free, the bird lifted into the air, circling twice around Oliver. Oliver felt that the bird was thanking him. Goodbye, and be careful, Oliver called out, feeling a bit silly, but he really meant it. The freed bird cawed back loudly twice and flew off. I think he was speaking to me, thanking me, Oliver said to Jasper. Jasper looked at Oliver, and that look made Oliver think that Jasper understood and agreed. Oliver walked over to a nearby garbage can near the beach. He wanted to make sure the bag was put away properly so it wouldn't hurt any other sea creatures. As he walked towards the trash bin, he noticed 3 little crabs in a small puddle of oil on the sand. Someone had dumped some kind of oil on the beach that the little crabs had walked into. It looked like they had gotten stuck in the oil. They were quite dead. Using the plastic bag, Oliver scooped up the dead crabs and went to put them into a garbage can. He was worried that the birds, like his new friend the gull, would try to eat them. The oil would make them very sick if they did. This made him sad, but it also made him angry. People's carelessness with their garbage had caused this. Oliver hated litter. Oliver placed the plastic bag with the crabs on the garbage can lid to check and make sure they weren't alive. He would have tried to save them if he could by washing the oil off, but it was too late. They were sadly indeed dead. Oliver felt so bad for them. Oliver thought about how people say the sea is so powerful and mighty. He then looked at the dead crabs in the oil. Could it be that the sea isn't as powerful and mighty as we think? Could it be that the sea is more fragile than we've all been led to believe? Oliver's thoughts were forgotten, though, when he looked over out at the sea, just as the Violette came into view. Finally, his father was home. Chapter 2. Oliver Dorian by the Sea. Oliver Dorian lived in a little wooden cottage in the small fishing village of Brigus, on the east coast of Newfoundland. Newfoundland is a province located on the far east coast of Canada, and it itself is a huge island. It is surrounded by the Atlantic Ocean that many people call the sea. Oliver lived with his mom and dad, his grandmother, whom he called Nanny, and his little dog, Jasper. His mother, France, worked at the local village fishery, and his father, Andy, was a fisherman. Part of his mother's job was to monitor or check the marine life, or sea life, that lived in that big body of water. His father's job was to catch the wonderful food that the sea had to offer. Nanny looked after Oliver when he wasn't in school, and his parents were at work. They were very close. Fishing is the main industry for the village of Brigus, and many other fishing villages all along the coast of Newfoundland. This is why the sea was so important to Oliver and all the other families that lived in these villages. It was not only how these families made their living, but it was also how they lived. Oliver's father, Andy, was a fisherman, as had been Andy's father, who had been named Barry. Barry's father had also been a fisherman, and many more generations before them. Oliver's grandfather, or Poppy, as he had called him, had passed away when Oliver was younger, but Oliver still had fond memories of him. All kinds of food came from the sea. Not only lots of different kinds of fish, but there are lobsters, clams, oysters, crabs, shrimp, and so much more. Even the salt that they used on their food comes from the sea. Sea salt. Oliver enjoyed all the seafood his father caught. He also liked snacking on seaweed. He especially liked the seaweed when it was dried and sprinkled with sea salt. The sea had so much food to offer. Oliver loved the sea itself. He enjoyed everything about living near this big body of water. It wasn't just the food. He loved the smell of the salty air and watching the fishing boats out on the water. He loved the long, warm, windy days of summer. Oliver even enjoyed the cold, sometimes stormy days and nights of winter. Fishing was their family's business, so they fished whenever they could, from early spring to late fall. They were busy with the fishing business. When winter came, his dad Andy did carpentry work. He built cabinets of all kinds of things, and even repairing old wooden fishing boats. A lot of fishermen were quite good in working with wood. In the old days, all the fishing boats were made from wood too. During the school year, Oliver and his dad had a regular routine. His dad would be out on the boat fishing while Oliver was in school. After school, he helped his dad with their fishing business. The first thing he did after he rode his bike home from school was greet his dog Jasper and his nanny. Nanny always had a snack ready for him. She always knew exactly what Oliver liked. He would then change his clothes. He always wore old clothes when helping his dad. Fishing could be a messy business. Although Oliver enjoyed going to school, he didn't have many close friends there. It wasn't that he didn't like the kids in his class. It was just that he did not have a lot in common with them. Often while at school, he hung around with Zach or Joey, who were in his class, or Nash and Noah, who were twins. They were fun, and they all ate their lunch together. Most of the kids in his class were into video games, though. Oliver only had the family laptop to use at home. Although he used it for schoolwork, the laptop was mostly used for the family fishing business. There weren't many chances for playing computer games. After school, Oliver helped his dad with the boat and the fish that they had caught that day. Like most of the children whose families fished for a living, there wasn't much time to hang around the school after classes. Zach and Joey also helped in their own families' fishing businesses. Chapter 3. Oliver and Bo. Oliver did have a best friend, however, and that was Bo Harding. Even though they were the same age, Bo didn't go to the same school as Oliver. Bo went to a school closer to where he and his family lived. The Harding family lived about 30 minutes away on a small farm near a place called Ocean Pond. Bo's mother, Tara, was a teacher, and his father, James, managed their organic farm. What really made Oliver happy, though, was that Bo's mother was Oliver's teacher at his school in Brigus. Mrs. Harding was Oliver's favorite teacher. Oliver did get to see Bo quite often, too, because Mrs. Harding and Oliver's mom were good friends and visited each other often. Years ago, they had gone to school together in Brigus. They were old friends. At least once a week, Miss Harding would come by their cottage to buy fish and other seafood from them. Oliver and his parents often went to Bo's family farm near Ocean Pond to visit and buy fresh farm goods from them. Bo's father always had plenty of vegetables like potatoes, tomatoes, beans, and lots of fresh eggs. Oliver loved it when they came to visit, and he loved it when they, in turn, visited Ocean Pond. Bo was a lot of fun to be with. Jasper also loved to play with Bo's dog, Stormy. The four of them had many adventures together. When Bo came to Oliver's cottage, one of their favorite games to play was Pirates. The two friends would hide and play around the old boats that were next to Oliver's cottage. Together, they would explore the beach looking for signs of pirate treasure. Jasper loved it too when Bo came because he almost always brought Stormy with him. While they both waited for Oliver's dad's boat to come in, they would build small forts out of driftwood that had washed up on shore. The forts became pirate hideouts during the day. Jasper loved to run up and down the beach, especially when Oliver tossed the pieces of driftwood for him to chase. The sea would take back its driftwood by night and spread it back over the beach the next day, ready for their next adventure. Now, Bo had started to feel the same as Oliver about litter. Bo didn't live near the sea and was shocked when Oliver had first shown him the garbage that had washed up on shore. Although both boys had seen it before, they never really noticed it and how much there really was. Bo and Oliver, both concerned, would collect any garbage that they came across now. They would put it in the old tote bag that they had been used for fishing. Bo always made it fun. Sometimes they pretended the trash was gold from a sunken pirate ship. They would gather it up and they would pretend they were going to be rich with the pirate gold they had gathered. Most days, though, when Bo wasn't with him, Oliver would ride straight home from school on his bike. When the snow came, or the weather was bad, Oliver would take the school bus. The school wasn't too far from their cottage, but the bus was easier to get back and forth to school when there was a lot of snow, or the weather made it difficult for bike riding. Once he was home with Jasper beside him, Oliver would then head back to the beach to wait for his father to bring the boat back home with today's catch. While he waited, he would spend the time picking up any litter he saw on the beach. Sometimes there was just a little. Sometimes his tote bag would be full. It was a good way to stay busy while he passed the time waiting. Chapter 4: Food from the Sea. Once his father pulled their fishing boat into the wharf, it was time to get busy and get to work. Oliver helped his dad carry the bins of fish up to the fish shed. The fish shed was next to their cottage. Here, everything that they had caught would be sorted out on the tables inside. They cleaned, scaled, and filleted some of the fish, making it ready to cook. Some of it went to the local fish market whole, just the way it was caught, where it would be sold to people and businesses looking for fresh fish. After Oliver's helped sort out the catch, his dad would weigh the different fish and seafood. All of this was written down or recorded in a big blue ledger book, which showed the type of seafood, how much was caught, their weight, and other information. Later, Oliver's mom would re-enter those numbers from the blue ledger into their computer. This way, they could keep track of how much seafood was caught. They kept a hard copy, which was the ledger book itself, and the computer would help create statistics on their catches. This was how they kept track of what was taken. Oliver's father was very careful about how much fish he caught and what kind. They had quotas, which is a limit to prevent them from catching too many fish. If everyone took what they wanted, there would be no fish left in the sea. Their quota was just enough for their family to eat and then enough to sell to make a living wage. That was their business. Catching and selling seafood was how they paid their bills. Oliver had a blue ledger book too. After everything from the boat was sorted and weighed, Oliver, just for fun, would adjust the scales and weigh his tote bag of fish and trash. Then they'd record how much trash he had collected into his own blue ledger book. He copied and recorded the weight of the trash just like his dad did for the fish. Once all this was finished, his father would be off to bring the fresh fish to the market to sell. The people buying the fish at the market were from all different places. Some buyers were from restaurants, Some buyers were from the village, and others were from factories that processed the fish for packaging and selling to other countries. They were all there to purchase fresh fish for their own businesses or homes. With his dad going to the market, Oliver would bring the seafood they would be keeping up to their cottage. This portion of the day's catch was to keep for themselves or to sell to people they know. Today's fishing haul included cod. Oliver loved cod and all the different ways his family cooked it. He hoped today's cod meant that they would be having fish and chips for supper. Fish and chips were one of Oliver's favorite meals. Chapter 5. Big Blue. Sometimes on the weekends, and in summer, Oliver, along with Jasper, helped his father on the fishing boat. Jasper wasn't much help, but he was good company. His barking also kept the herring gulls away from the fish already caught. Jasper enjoyed being on the boat as much as Oliver. Oliver helped sort the fish as it was brought in by the nets. This saved some time after getting home. He kept things tidy on the boat, too. It was his job to make sure the fishing nets didn't get tangled. Even though the work was hard, Oliver enjoyed working with his father on their boat. One late spring day, while they were out on the boat, an amazing thing happened. When they were far out on the water, Oliver saw a big whale cross in front of their boat. While whales were a familiar sight, this was a blue whale, which wasn't as common to see. "Look, Dad!" Oliver called out, even though the whale was still far away. His father seemed to recognize it, and he became excited too. After watching the whale for a moment, his dad pointed out the color patterning on the whale's body and a specific mark on its giant tail. Oliver could feel his dad's excitement. "Look, Oliver, that's a blue whale, a very special blue whale. This is the one that us fishermen around here calls Big Blue. He's the biggest of the blue whales of any of us has ever seen." Oliver went to the front of the fishing boat and stared at the whale in awe. "Wow," is all he could say. Big Blue was magnificent. He was huge. Big Blue slowly seemed to turn and started heading toward their boat. Now Oliver got to see him even closer. "He's amazing," whispered Oliver to his dad. The whale then stopped, and then, just like that, disappeared down into the water. Oliver thought he was gone, but his dad told him, "Wait, Oliver, he might come back up." Then, suddenly, the water started to churn at the front of their boat. It looked like the blue whale was coming back up to the surface. Then, with a huge splash of water, the giant whale seemed to leap out of the water in what is called a breach. The whale went straight up in the air. It then did what looked like a half-turn somersault while it was still in the air. It was so amazing to see. Oliver and his dad just stood there, watching in amazement. After the half-turn, it came back down into the water in a giant splash. Oliver couldn't move. He felt like he was frozen. He had never seen anything like this before and so close to the boat. Although he had seen quite a few whales, he had even seen whales breach before, he had never seen a blue whale and up so close. Oliver knew that whales were the biggest mammals in the world. His dad told him to remember this day, as there were not too many blue whales around anymore. Oliver asked his dad why whales breach, and his dad replied that the theory was they were trying to communicate or talk, probably with other whales. Oliver couldn't see any other whales around. If Big Blue was trying to talk, who was Big Blue trying to talk to? Chapter 6. whales that are blue. That evening, during supper, Oliver couldn't stop talking about the blue whale. He told the story over and over to his mother. Then he told it all over again to his nanny. Supper was all about Big Blue. "You should have seen him, Mom. He's huge." He especially loved telling the part about how the blue whale had breached so close to the boat. Oliver's mom smiled and really enjoyed his story. She loved to see Oliver so excited. She was especially happy that he had actually seen Big Blue himself. After hearing the story yet again, both his parents and Nanny told him, "Oliver, why don't you call Grammy and Papa and tell them?" Still talking and getting even more excited, he called his other grandparents. They usually called each other on video chat. His Grammy and Papa lived in Montreal and video chatted with Oliver often. They too were very excited to hear his story. "Grammy! Papa!" he practiced, yelling at the computer. "You won't believe what I saw today. Today I was out on the Violette with my dad and we saw an actual blue whale. And it was huge." And so he went on to tell them in lots of detail the story of the giant whale everyone called Big Blue. When he got to the part of when Big Blue breached, he had to explain to them what it meant. "Grammy, Papa, did you know that when they breach, they shoot straight up into the air, right out of the water?" Oliver explained. "Dad says that when they do that, it's probably to communicate with each other, but there were no other whales around, anywhere." Then Oliver whispered quietly to his grandparents, "I think Big Blue was trying to communicate with me. I think he was trying to talk to me." Oliver's grandparents loved his story and were very happy for him too. They listened to him explain all about whales. It took a while for the full story to come out because he was so excited. Oliver asked, "When are you coming to visit? Can you come soon?" Grammy and Papa promised him that they would come and visit him soon and made him very happy. Next, he had to video chat with Bo. He was so excited to tell him about Big Blue. Bo was super excited that Oliver told even more information about these giant blue whales. Bo had seen other whales too, even a blue whale once when they were on his uncle's fishing boat. But Bo had never seen Big Blue himself. He had heard a lot about him through his uncle. He told Oliver even more amazing information. "Blue whales are the size and weight of 25 adult elephants put together. Imagine that! That's as long as 15 school buses lined up in a row. That's enormous!" Oliver could not picture 15 school buses lined up in a row outside his school. There wasn't enough room. Bo went on. "They are the biggest mammal in the world." Oliver replied, "I know there used to be lots of blue whales before, but there are not as many now. My dad said blue whales are now endangered. That means there aren't as many left, and if no one helps them, they might disappear forever." Oliver had known this before, but after seeing Big Blue up so close, he saw it now with different eyes. People should be protecting the biggest creatures of the sea. They were just too magnificent to lose them forever. "You are right," Bo continued. "The biggest reason is climate change. The blue whale depends on large amounts of krill to eat. It is their favorite and most abundant food. With the water temperature rising from climate change, it's killing the krill." Oliver had studied the problem in school too. He also knew that plastic was an ongoing issue. Tiny pieces of plastic called microplastic, because it was so small, were a big problem for today's whales and other sea life. The krill were eating these tiny pieces. The whales then ate the krill. So that meant that whales were eating plastic too. He had been concerned the first time he had learned about it in class. Now he was even more worried. He was worried very much about the future of Big Blue and all the other whales too, not just blue whales. Oliver knew that krill were crustaceans. That meant they have a skeleton, but it is on the outside of their bodies. Not like people and other animals that have their skeleton on the inside of their bodies. Krill looks like tiny shrimp. They are usually the size of a regular paperclip, which is not very big. Whales depend on very large amounts of krill for their food. Oliver and Bo talked for a while longer on video chat. They talked a bit more about whales, school, books they both liked, homework, and when they would get together again to play. Oliver enjoyed talking and playing with Bo. That's why they were best friends. The next day at school, Oliver was so thrilled to tell his story to his friends Zach, Joey, Nash, and Noah. They did appear to be happy for him and seemed interested in his story, but just not as excited as Bo had been. But that was okay. They didn't have the same interests as Oliver did, after all, but they were still good friends. They all got along together. Chapter 7: A Stuffed Whale. A couple of weeks later, Oliver received a parcel in the mail from his grandparents. Montreal was a long way from where Oliver's cottage and his family lived. He was always thrilled to get these parcels in the mail. Oliver's granny loved to knit for him. A lot of people said that she was a great knitter. Sometimes it was a sweater, sometimes mittens, lots of hats and socks for the winter. It could get very cold in the winter where he lived, by the sea. His Grammy and Papa always sent him something interesting too. Sometimes it was a book or a puzzle. Sometimes there was a toy. Jasper was always excited too when he saw the parcel. Grammy and Papa always had a treat or a toy for Jasper in there too. This time, when Oliver opened the box, he was so happy. Inside was a big, beautiful, plush blue whale. He immediately named his new favorite stuffy Big Blue and quickly made a special place for him on his bed. He had his mother take a picture of the blue whale stuffed toy with her phone and sent it to Grammy and Papa. Of course, Jasper had to get in the picture with his new squeaky toy. At night, especially when it was stormy outside, Oliver loved to snuggle in his bed, all warm and cozy with one of his books. Pirate books were his favorite. He also enjoyed books that were about the sea itself and adventures, stories on the sea. The wind and waves crashing on the shore outside were like a lullaby to him. Now, he kept his big stuffed blue whale with him. He felt it was like his lucky charm, a reminder of that wonderful memory of seeing Big Blue. After he finished reading, or sometimes before, he would drift off to sleep with his arm around Big Blue, dreaming dreams of pirates, fishing boats, newfound treasures of gold, and, of course, whales in and on the sea. Now he had a new dream. This dream had started the first night he saw his first real blue whale. In his dream, Big Blue came to see Oliver while he and his dad were on their fishing boat. The whale would float up close to the Violet. In his dream, the blue whale seemed to know him. Also in the dream, a herring gull circled over him twice and called out to Oliver. He was sure it was the same herring gull he had helped that had been trapped with the grocery bag. As the dream continued, suddenly Big Blue would shoot out of the water and breach in front of their boat, over and over again and again. Each breach as awesome as the first. Maybe the whale really was trying to communicate with Oliver? It was as if the sea is speaking to me, Oliver thought. He loved having this dream. It was a wonderful dream to have. It kept that memory of Big Blue alive. He only wished he knew what it meant. If Big Blue was trying to communicate, what was he trying to say? Chapter 8. A Contest. The weather was changing. Soon spring would be turning into summer. The days were getting longer and warmer. Also, this meant for the children of Brigus that soon school would be finishing for the year. Summer vacation was coming. Usually, at the end of each school year, Oliver's school had a science fair. It was very popular with all the kids. This was the children's chance to show off their great ideas that had to do with science. Last year, Oliver had built a volcano that really worked. It was pretty cool. Today, which was a Friday, and the last school day of the week, Mrs. Harding had an announcement to make. She stood in front of the class and explained that this year, the school was going to be doing something different in place of the science fair. Their school was joining up with other schools along the coastal fishing villages to have a contest about pollution, specifically pollution in our waters. Those students that were interested in entering the contest would be working on ideas to clean up the pollution in our waters. A solution for water pollution, it was being called. Oliver was very curious and very interested in this contest. Mrs. Harding continued to explain to the class that this water pollution problem was very important, not only to the village of Brigus, but all the nearby fishing villages and beyond. It involved all the fishing villages along the coast of Newfoundland that depended on the sea for food. Pollution had become worse lately, and the whole island of Newfoundland was looking for creative ways to help clean it up. Mrs. Harding wanted all the children in her class to be creative. "Put your thinking hats on," she finished. All the kids in the classroom started talking all at once. This was not just interesting. This sounded like fun. Oliver really liked this idea. He started to think, if we could clean up the sea, find a way to clean up the sea, the krill and other seafood wouldn't be eating plastic, and whales like the blue whale would no longer be endangered. Yes, this contest was going to be a very great idea indeed. The kids in Oliver's class were very excited. Oliver could hear all the chatter around him. Ideas, all kinds of ideas were being thrown around. He could hear someone in the class discussing a mega boat with nets. He could hear other kids discussing a machine with a big bucket to scoop up garbage. He could hear someone else talk about using hundreds of Legos to build their machine. There were some really good ideas that were being chatted about. Some sounded very elaborate. Oliver already had his own idea. His idea meant a lot to him, but he wasn't sure if the others would think it was that good. He didn't want the others to think his idea was silly, or worse yet, dumb. It sounded like the judges would be looking for something really big and super creative, but that was okay. He wasn't thinking about winning. He was thinking this contest maybe was a good opportunity for his idea to be heard. "Settle down now, everyone," said Mrs. Harding. "There is even more to this contest. Not just the teachers are judging this year. There are going to be judges coming into each of the schools to see what you have come up with. The judges are from the fishery department. The winner, The person who comes up with the best idea will bring their project down to the Brigus Community Center to show everyone their winning idea. They will get to present their plan or project to the rest of the community at a special meeting planned about climate change and water pollution. Everyone from the community will be invited. And then the winner from that contest will go on to represent our school next fall. That will be when we come back after summer vacation. Everyone in the class suddenly went quiet. Wow, said Zach. That's awesome. This is big. Once again, the class started chatting away. This time, louder and even more excited. This really was big. The village didn't have a big city hall because it was quite small. Instead, they had a community center that was used for almost the same thing. Everyone in the village would be there, and the winner from there would go on to represent the rest of the fishing villages along the coast. This was really awesome, but it was also scary. And that concludes the first part of Oliver Dorian by Maryte Running. We're going to continue the rest in our next episode, because lo and behold, this work actually is running quite over our time, and it's a good story. So I think what we'll do is next episode will actually be episode 9B, whereas this one will be episode 9A. Thanks for listening, everybody. Take care. Join us next Friday for more stories from the Rock.